Hey guys, tonight we step into the sun-scorched streets of ancient Rome, where the air hums with incense and ambition. Picture yourself dodging ox carts, your sandals slapping against cobblestones, as a massive statue of Emperor Augustus looms overhead, his marble eyes glinting like he's about to demand your lunch money. The Romans didn't just respect their emperors, they worshiped them as gods. Why? That's our journey, unraveling the divine rise of power and status in a world where mortals dared to claim immortality. Fair warning, questioning a god emperor's vibe might get you tossed to the lions, so you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're chilling. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in Rome, 27 BCE, and the city's buzzing like a beehive after a good shake. Octavian, fresh off his victory at Actium, has just been crowned Augustus, the first Roman emperor. He's not just a war hero, he's styling himself as a living god. Temples are popping up with his name carved in gold, and priests are chanting his praises like he's Jupiter's long-lost cousin. This isn't just ego, though let's be real. Augustus had enough of that to fill the Colosseum. Mainstream history tells us he crafted this divine image to unify a fractured empire, blending Roman tradition with Hellenistic flair from conquered lands like Egypt, where pharaohs were already god kings. His title, Divi Filius, son of a god, tied him to Julius Caesar, deified after his assassination. It's a power move, and you can feel the crowd's awe as they bow to his statue. But here's the quirky bit. Not everyone was sold. Some Romans whispered that Augustus smeared his face with crocodile dung sunscreen to mimic the glow of a god. True or not, it's the kind of gossip that spiced up tavern chats. Historians still argue whether Augustus genuinely believed his divinity or if it was all a slick PR campaign. You're there, watching priests pour wine for his divine spirit, and you can't help but wonder, is this guy for real? The Senate's eating it up, granting him divine honors faster than you can say free bread and circuses. They're not just crowning a leader, they're building a myth. You notice the people's faces, some reverent, some skeptical, but all playing along. Why? Because in Rome, power isn't just swords and coins, it's belief. As you weave through the forum, you spot a merchant selling tiny Augustus figurines, like ancient action figures. Joke number one, bet they came with a smite your enemies button that didn't work. The city's alive with this new cult, but it's not just blind faith. Augustus rebuilt temples, fed the poor, and made Rome feel invincible. You see a farmer kneel before his statue, muttering thanks for a good harvest. Divinity, it seems, is practical. It's not about lightning bolts, it's about loyalty. You're starting to get why this works. Rome's a mess of cultures, and a god emperor might just hold it together. But you're also wondering, how do you convince a city to worship a guy who probably snores like a mortal? That's next. So let's keep moving, past the shouting vendors and into the heart of this divine gamble. You're still in Rome, the air thick with dust and devotion, as you duck into a crowded marketplace. The scent of roasted chickpeas and sweat hits you, and everywhere people chatter about Augustus, their god emperor. You're wondering, why do Romans buy this? Why kneel to a guy who's just a fancy politician with a divine side hustle? Let's unpack why this city, practical, cynical, and obsessed with power, accepts emperors as gods. The mainstream fact is Rome's religious flexibility. Unlike rigid monotheistic faiths, Roman polytheism was a buffet of gods, from Jupiter to random river spirits. Adding an emperor to the mix wasn't a stretch. It was just another Tuesday. Augustus leaned into this, framing himself as a divine unifier. His Pax Romana, decades of relative peace, made people feel like he was blessed by the heavens. You see a baker offering bread at Augustus's shrine, muttering thanks for stable grain prices. It's not just faith, it's gratitude for a system that works. His divine status glued together an empire stretching from Spain to Syria, where locals already worshipped rulers. You're impressed, but also a bit weirded out. Worshipping a guy who probably haggles over togas feels off. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed emperor's divine aura could heal. Stories swirled of Augustus's touch curing fevers, or his statues warding off plagues. You spot a woman clutching an amulet shaped like his face, whispering for her kid's cough to vanish. It's half superstition, half hope, like buying a knockoff miracle cure from a sketchy vendor. Historians still argue whether Romans genuinely saw emperors as supernatural or just played along for social clout. You're leaning toward the latter as you watch a senator, dripping in gold, make a showy offering at a shrine. Peer pressure's a powerful thing. The real hook is cultural. Rome's all about hierarchy: patricians, plebs, slaves, and divinity just cranks it up. You notice how people lower their eyes when Augustus's name is mentioned, like he's watching. It's not just fear, it's habit. The emperor's divine status reinforces the pecking order. making rebellion feel like blasphemy. Joke 1. Imagine telling Augustus his divine toga's on backward. Yep, straight to the lion pit. You wander past a priest chanting Augustus's titles, and it hits you. This is propaganda, ancient style. His face is on coins, statues, even bread stamps. You can't escape him. But it's not all smooth. You overhear a grizzled veteran muttering that no mortal's a god, divine title or not. He's not alone. Skeptics exist, especially in far-off provinces where locals worship their own gods. Yet most play the game because it's practical. You see a merchant slip a coin to a priest for a divine blessing on his trade. It's less about faith and more about networking. Joke 2. Bet the priest's blessing came with a receipt for tax purposes. The system works because it's woven into daily life. Temples, festivals, even oaths sworn on Augustus's name. As you leave the market, you're struck by the genius of it. Romans accept divine emperors because it's familiar, useful, and keeps the empire humming. But you're curious. What's it like to actually worship this guy? You're about to find out, slipping toward a temple where the chants grow louder and the incense thicker. Keep moving. The divine show's just getting started. You're weaving through Rome's bustling streets, the sun dipping low, casting golden streaks across marble temples. The crowd's thickening near a grand altar where priests in flowing robes burn incense that stings your nose. You're about to witness the rituals that turn emperors into gods, binding an empire with chants and offerings. This is where Augustus's divine status isn't just talk, it's a performance, and you're in the front row. The mainstream fact is that emperor worship was a state-organized spectacle. The imperial cult, as historians call it, wasn't a casual fan club. It was a machine. Temples, altars, and festivals were funded by the Senate, with priests, often elite politicians, leading the charge. You watch a priest pour wine onto a fire, chanting Augustus's name as flames leap. The crowd murmurs prayers, not just for him, but for Rome's prosperity. These rituals weren't optional. Towns across the empire held them to prove loyalty. You feel the weight of expectation. Skip the ceremony, and you're basically shouting, "I hate Rome." It's less about faith and more about patriotism on steroids. Here's the quirky bit. Some rituals involved emperor-themed party favors. You spot kids clutching tiny bronze busts of Augustus, handed out like ancient swag bags. Rumor has it, some folks use them as lucky charms or doorstops. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were heartfelt or just bureaucratic box ticking. You're leaning toward the latter as you see a bored official yawning mid-chant. Still, the vibe's electric. Drums thrum, and the crowd sways like they're at a divine rock concert. You step closer, dodging a stray goat being led to sacrifice. Joke 1. Bet that goat's wondering why it didn't sign up for the Divine Emperor gig. The ritual's core is the genius, Augustus's divine spirit, worshipped alongside gods like Jupiter. You notice people tossing grain into the fire, each offering a tiny contract. Bless us, keep us safe. It's practical, like tipping a cosmic waiter. The emperor's divinity ties the empire together. Gauls, Greeks, and Egyptians all join in, tweaking the rites to fit their local gods. You're impressed by the flexibility. It's like a divine franchise. But there's tension. You overhear a skeptic mutter that no man's spirit deserves this fuss, especially one who's still alive, probably eating figs in his palace. The priests ignore him, but you sense the divide, devotion versus duty. Joke 2. Imagine Augustus sneezing during a ritual, and everyone pretending it's a holy gust. The ceremonies work because they're inescapable. You see merchants, soldiers, even slaves participating, each for their own reasons: profit, promotion, or just blending in. The cult's genius is its inclusivity. Everyone's invited, as long as they bow. As night falls, the fire's glow lights up faces, some reverent, some just here for the free bread afterward. You're starting to get it. These rituals aren't just about Augustus. They're about Rome itself. They make the emperor untouchable, his power woven into the empire's soul. But you're curious about the strings behind the curtain. Who's pulling them? You're about to slip into the Senate's shadow, where divinity meets cold, hard politics. Keep moving. The incense is fading, but the game's heating up. You're slinking through Rome's back streets now, the glow of torches flickering on damp stone walls. The grandeur of temples fades, replaced by the murmur of senators in shadowed doorways, their togas brushing the ground like conspirators' cloaks. You're diving into the gritty politics behind emperor worship, where divinity isn't just spiritual, it's a calculated power grab. Augustus's godly status? It's less about miracles and more about who controls the board in this high-stakes game. The mainstream fact is that emperor worship was a political tool to cement loyalty. Augustus didn't just inherit power, he engineered it. After Caesar's assassination, Rome was a tinderbox. Rival generals, restless provinces, and a senate itching to stab someone else. By becoming divine, Augustus rose above mortal squabbles. You overhear a senator grumble about swearing oaths to Augustus's genius. It's not optional, it's law. This divine branding made rebellion, treason, and blasphemy. You feel the tension. Senators bow to statues, but their eyes dart, calculating. Augustus's divinity keeps the empire's gears turning, from tax collection to army morale. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some senators allegedly bribed priests to divinely predict Augustus's victories. You catch a whiff of this as a nervous official slips a coin to a soothsayer, muttering about a favorable omen. Historians still argue whether Augustus orchestrated these miracles or just winked at the scams. You're betting on the wink. Guys too sharp to miss a trick. The Senate's complicity is key. They vote divine honors, build temples, and pocket the prestige. It's a mutual hustle. You pause near the curia, where deals are cut. Joke 1. Bet Augustus's divine title came with a no refunds clause for disloyal senators. The politics are ruthless. Divinity lets Augustus bypass checks and balances. He's not just first citizen, he's untouchable. You see a provincial governor swear loyalty to his statue, knowing one wrong move means exile. The cult's a loyalty test, weeding out dissenters. Joke 2. Imagine forgetting the divine oath and accidentally pledging to your pet cat instead. Awkward. But it's not all smooth. You spot graffiti mocking Augustus's godly nose. Proof not everyone's drinking the divine wine. Resistance simmers, especially in provinces where local elites resent Roman rituals. Yet the system's genius is its stickiness. You watch a merchant join a cult ceremony, not out of faith, but to secure a trade deal. Divinity greases the empire's wheels. Tax breaks, contracts, and promotions all flow through the cult. The Senate, once Rome's backbone, now plays hype man, trading autonomy for influence. As you slip away, the torchlight dims, and you're struck by the machine's elegance. Augustus's divinity isn't just worshipped, it's enforced, a political masterstroke that keeps Rome's chaos in check. But you're curious about the physical side, those temples rising like divine billboards. You're headed there next, where marble and ambition collide. Keep moving. The senator's whispers are fading, but the stakes are climbing. You're trudging up a hill in Rome, the city sprawling below, like a patchwork of ambition. The air's heavy with the scent of cut stone and sacrifice as you approach a gleaming temple, its columns soaring toward the sky. This is the heart of emperor worship, shrines built for living gods, where marble and myth turn men like Augustus into legends. You're about to wander these sacred spaces, feeling the weight of their purpose. The mainstream fact is that temples to emperors were propaganda in stone. Augustus's temple of Divus Julius, honoring his deified adoptive father, set the blueprint. By 14 CE, his own shrines dotted the empire, from Italy to Asia Minor. You stand before one, its friezes showing Augustus as a god, chariot and all. These weren't just places of worship, they were billboards of power, funded by loyal elites to show allegiance. You notice priests bustling about, organizing offerings, wine, grain, even the occasional bull. The temple's a hub, tying far-flung provinces to Rome's divine ruler. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some temples doubled as community centers. You spot locals haggling over figs in the courtyard, kids playing near the altar. One rumor claims a temple in Gaul hosted a weekly book club. Divine reading, anyone? Historians still argue whether these shrines were more religious or political. You're leaning political, seeing how every statue screams, Augustus is watching. The temple's design, grand, uniform, makes his divinity feel eternal. Even if his mortal body's back in Rome, probably napping, you step inside, the cool marble chilling your sandals. Joke 1. Bet Augustus's statue wishes it could sneeze without breaking the divine vibe. The space is alive. Incense curls, chants echo, and worshippers kneel. It's not just devotion, it's networking. You see a merchant slip a priest a coin for a blessing on his trade route. These temples anchor the imperial cult, making emperor worship a daily ritual. From Spain to Syria, they're Rome's brand, like ancient franchises with divine mascots. But there's a shadow. You overhear a gruff voice outside, muttering that no man deserves a temple while he's still alive. Skeptics exist, especially in places like Judea, where monotheism clashes with Roman rites. Yet most play along, refusing risks losing status or worse. Joke 2. Imagine telling a priest you'd rather worship your pet turtle. Good luck with that exile. The temples work because they're practical, blending faith, politics, and social climbing. You watch a senator dedicate a new altar, his speech dripping with flattery. It's less about gods and more about securing his next governorship. As you leave, the temple's glow lingers, a testament to Augustus's genius. These shrines aren't just buildings, they're the empire's backbone, making his divinity impossible to ignore. But you're wondering about the cracks, those who dare resist this divine machine. You're headed there next, where rebellion brews in the shadows. Keep moving, the marble's cold, but the tension's heating up. You're slipping through Rome's fringes now, where the city's polish gives way to gritty alleys and whispered dissent. The air's sharp with smoke from cheap oil lamps, and you catch glimpses of figures huddled in doorways, their voices low. Not everyone's buying the divine emperor hype. You're diving into the rebellion, those who challenge Augustus's godly status, risking everything to spit in the face of a so-called god. The mainstream fact is that resistance to emperor worship was real but scattered. The imperial cult demanded loyalty, but provinces like Judea and parts of Gaul bristled at bowing to a mortal. You overhear a Jewish trader muttering about his one God, refusing to offer incense at Augustus's shrine. His defiance isn't loud, but it's bold. Roman officials could slap him with treason for less. These rebellions weren't organized uprisings. They were pockets of stubbornness, from religious purists to local elites who hated Rome's heavy hand. You feel the tension, like a taut bowstring ready to snap. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some rebels mocked Augustus's divinity with graffiti. You spot a crude sketch on a wall, a toga-clad figure with a donkey's head, labeled Divine Donkey. Locals snicker, but they glance around nervously. Defacing a god emperor's image could mean a one-way trip to the arena. Historians still argue whether these acts were principled or just petty vandalism. You're betting on a mix. Nothing says, screw the system, like a well-placed doodle. You edge closer to a tavern where a grizzled veteran's ranting about the old republic when men were men, not gods. Joke 1. Bet he'd challenge Augustus to a duel, then regret it when the Praetorian Guard shows up. Resistance is risky. Rome's spies are everywhere. You see a merchant quickly cover a seditious pamphlet as a patrol passes. The cult's power lies in its reach. Refusing to worship Augustus could cost you trade, status, or your head. Yet some persist, driven by faith or pride. In Judea, zealots outright reject the cult, sparking clashes that ripple for centuries. But it's not all noble. You notice a shady politician whispering rebellion to dodge taxes, cloaking his greed in anti-divine rhetoric. Joke 2. Imagine him claiming religious freedom while hiding gold under his toga. Most rebels, though, are quieter. Locals who skip ceremonies or mutter prayers to their own gods. You admire their guts, but wince at the cost. Rome's response is brutal. Fines, exile, or worse. The empire's too big to crush every dissenter, but it makes examples. You hear a rumor of a Gallic priestess executed for burning an Augustus statue. True or not, it chills the air. As you slip away, the tavern's noise fades, but the defiance lingers. These rebels, small as their acts seem, chip at the cult's foundation. You're starting to see the cracks in Augustus's divine armor. But how do you make a man a god in the first place? You're headed to the mythmakers next, where stories spin mortals into legends. Keep moving. The shadows are deep, but the truth's deeper. You're wandering Rome's bustling forum now, where poets and orators spin tales under the midday sun. The air hums with their voices, weaving stories that drift like incense over the crowd. You're here to uncover how mythology transforms emperors like Augustus into gods, crafting legends that make mortals seem eternal. These aren't just bedtime stories, they're the scaffolding of divine power. The mainstream fact is that Augustus's divine image was a masterpiece of propaganda. His team, poets like Virgil and Ovid, crafted epics tying him to gods and heroes. Virgil's Aeneid paints Augustus as Aeneas's heir, destined to rule a golden age. You overhear a bard reciting lines about Augustus's divine lineage from Venus herself. It's not just flattery, it's a script. Statues show him youthful, godlike. Even as he ages, you see a kid gawking at one, whispering that Augustus must wrestle thunderbolts. The myth makes him larger than life, gluing the empire's loyalty to a single, shining figure. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some myths claimed Augustus's birth was heralded by comets and talking animals. You catch a street performer claiming a cow predicted his rise. Crowds laugh, but some nod, half believing. Historians still argue whether these stories were state-sponsored or grassroots gossip. You're betting on a mix. Augustus's PR crew knew a good cow tale could spread faster than a Senate decree. The myths work because they're sticky, blending Roman pride with divine destiny. You pause by a fountain where an old man recounts Augustus's miracles, calming storms, multiplying grain. Joke 1. Bet his real miracle was dodging Rome's traffic without a scratch. These stories aren't just for kicks, they're tools. Priests weave them into sermons, making Augustus's divinity feel ancient, inevitable. You notice a merchant nodding along, buying it because it's easier than questioning. The myths borrow from older gods, Apollo's light, Jupiter's might, making Augustus feel familiar, like a deity you've always known. But there's a catch. You spot a skeptic rolling his eyes, muttering that no comet ever sang Augustus's name. Not everyone swallows the hype, especially in provinces where local myths clash with Rome's. Yet the stories persist, carved into temples, sung at festivals. Joke 2. Imagine Augustus hearing his cow prophecy and asking for a refund on the oracle. The myth machine's genius is its reach. Every coin, every statue tells the tale. You see a soldier swear by Augustus' name, not Jupiter's, and it hits you. The myth's rewriting faith itself. As you move on, the form's clamor softens, but the stories echo. These myths aren't just fluff. They're the glue binding an empire, making a man a god. But at what cost? You're headed next to weigh the toll of this divine obsession on Rome's soul. keep moving. The tales are fading, but their impact lingers. You're trudging through Rome's crowded streets, the buzz of daily life, vendors shouting, kids darting underfoot, masking a deeper hum of obligation. The emperor's divine status isn't just a spectacle, it's reshaping Rome's soul. You're here to grapple with the cost of worshiping Augustus as a god, how it bends society from the elite to the enslaved into a machine that runs on devotion. The mainstream fact is that the imperial cult was a social glue, but it came at a price. It unified the empire by demanding loyalty over individuality. You see a farmer offer grain at Augustus's shrine, not out of love, but because skipping it could mean losing his land. The cult permeated life, oaths, taxes, even marriage vows, tied to the emperor's divinity. It fostered stability, but it also bred conformity. You notice people glancing around, ensuring they're seen praying. It's less faith, more performance, and it's exhausting. The empire's stronger, but the cost is a society where free thought feels like a luxury. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Romans used emperor worship to settle petty scores. You overhear a shopkeeper accuse his rival of disrespecting Augustus's statue to get him fined. It's like weaponizing a divine Yelp review. Historians still argue whether the cult empowered communities or just turned neighbors into snitches. You're leaning toward snitches, watching how fear of being undevout keeps everyone in line. The cult's a social trap, rewarding loyalty with status and punishing doubt with ostracism. You pause by a public square where a priest drones on about Augustus's divine blessings. Joke 1. Bet the priest's secretly praying for a shorter shift. The cult's impact is everywhere. Schools teach kids to revere the emperor. Guilds host divine festivals to curry favor. You see a slave forced to worship a man who owns him, his face blank. It's grim. The cult doesn't just unify, it erases. Provinces lose their old gods, their rituals replaced by Roman ones. You feel the weight, diversity's traded for control. But there's another side. You spot a merchant thriving because he's pious, his shop blessed by a priest. The cult opens doors, trade deals, promotions, social clout. Joke 2. Imagine bragging about your divine loyalty on a Roman dating profile. Yet the cost lingers. You hear whispers of families split over refusing cult rites, or locals shunned for clinging to old gods. The empire's cohesion comes by flattening differences, and you're torn. Stability's nice, but at what price? The cult's a machine, and society's the fuel. As you slip away, the square's noise fades, but the tension sticks. Worshipping Augustus holds Rome together, but it's squeezing something vital out. You're curious now about the ultimate flaw. How do you worship a God who dies? You're headed there next, where mortality clashes with myth. Keep moving. The crowd's thinning, but the questions aren't. You're standing in Rome's Forum, the air heavy with dusk and the faint clink of coins changing hands. The city's alive, but there's a shadow creeping in. Augustus, the god emperor, won't live forever. You're here to question how Rome grapples with the mortality of its divine rulers. If a god can die, what's left of the myth? Let's walk through the cracks in this divine facade. The mainstream fact is that emperors' deaths posed a theological puzzle. When Augustus died in 14 CE, the Senate declared him a god, his soul ascending to join the divine council. You watch priests perform his apotheosis rites, a grand show with a wax effigy burned to free his spirit. Crowds cheer, but you sense unease. How's a guy who choked on a fig, or so the gossip goes, suddenly immortal? The Romans solved this by deifying dead emperors, turning mortality into a divine promotion. It's clever, but you're not sure everyone's buying it. New emperors, like Tiberius, inherit the divine glow, keeping the cult humming. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Romans swore they saw Augustus's ghost haunting his old palace, muttering about unfinished paperwork. You overhear a baker chuckling about it, half joking that even gods can't escape bureaucracy. Historians still argue whether these ghost stories were propaganda to boost his legend or just tavern tales gone wild. You're leaning toward the latter. It's too absurd not to be true. Either way, death exposes the cult's fragility. No statue can hide a corpse. You linger by a shrine where a widow prays to Divus Augustus for her sick child. Joke 1. Bet she's hoping his divine Wi-Fi's stronger now. The cult's built on this sleight of hand. Death doesn't end divinity. It upgrades it. But you notice skeptics in the crowd, whispering that no god needs a funeral. Provinces like Judea, with their one eternal God, scoff at this mortal to divine pipeline. You feel the tension. The cult's strength is its flexibility, but death's a hard sell. New emperors must prove their own divine spark, and not all do. You hear rumors of Caligula's antics, already fraying the myth. The real challenge is belief. You see a soldier swear loyalty to Augustus's divine name, but his eyes flicker. Does he buy it, or is it just habit? Joke 2. Imagine asking a god emperor for a sick day and getting a divine nope. The cult survives by momentum. Temples, rituals, and coins keep the divine brand alive. But each death chips away at the magic. You're struck by the irony. Rome's gods are eternal, but its god emperors keep dying. The Senate's quick to deify, but you wonder how long the people will play along. As you slip away, the form's torches dim, and the weight of mortality lingers. Augustus's divine myth is mighty, but death's a stubborn fact. You're ready to see what lasts when the god emperors fade. You're headed there next to trace the echoes of this divine experiment. Keep moving. The night's deep, but the story's deeper. You're wandering Rome's quiet outskirts now. The city's glow softening into twilight. The clamor of temples and markets feels distant, like a dream fading at dawn. You're here to reflect on the legacy of emperor worship, how Augustus's divine gamble echoes through time, shaping Rome's soul and beyond. The god emperor's myth is fraying, but its shadow lingers. Let's trace those final threads. The mainstream fact is that emperor worship outlived Augustus, but it evolved. By the 4th century CE, Christianity's rise dethroned the divine emperors. You imagine Constantine, Rome's first Christian emperor, sidestepping the old cult for a new god. Yet the imperial cult's fingerprints lingered. Byzantine rulers styled themselves as God's chosen, and medieval kings claimed divine rights. You see a merchant in Rome's fading forums, still offering a coin to Augustus's statue out of habit. The cult's machinery, temples, oaths, propaganda, taught empires how to wield belief as power. It's a blueprint that outlasts marble. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some late Romans repurposed emperor statues as garden gnomes. You picture a crumbling bust of Augustus propping up a vineyard, grapes dangling over his divine nose. Historians still argue whether the cult's decline was inevitable or hastened by overzealous emperors like Nero, who demanded worship while fiddling through Rome's flames. You're betting on both. Divinity's hard to sell when your god's setting fires. The cult's legacy isn't just political, it's cultural, teaching rulers to craft untouchable personas. You pause by a crumbling shrine, its altar cracked but still dusted with offerings. Joke 1. Bet Augustus's ghost is annoyed. His shrine's now a pigeon hotel. The cult's impact was double-edged. It unified Rome but stifled dissent, paving the way for autocrats. You think of modern leaders, their faces plastered on billboards, and smirk. Same game, new props. The cult taught loyalty could be manufactured, a lesson echoing in every flag-waving parade. But it also left scars. Provinces forced to kneel lost their gods, their voices. You feel the weight of that trade-off. The legacy's deepest cut is belief itself. You see a priest, old and weary, chanting to a near-empty crowd. Joke 2. Imagine him pitching Augustus's divinity like a used chariot salesman. The cult made faith a tool, blurring lines between reverence and obedience. As Christianity spread, it borrowed the cult's tricks, grand rituals, sacred images, but aimed higher toward eternity. You're struck by the irony. Augustus's divine spark lit a fire that burned out his own myth. The empire's gone, but its lesson, power needs stories, still hums in the air. As twilight deepens, you sit by the shrine, the world slowing. The stars emerge, soft and steady, like whispers of forgotten gods. You feel Rome's pulse, its ambition and ache, fading into the earth. Emperor worship was a dream of control, brilliant but brittle, binding millions until it couldn't. Let it go now. Picture the city sleeping, its stones cool, its stories tucked into the night. You're safe here, wrapped in history's gentle hum. Close your eyes, let the fan's drone carry you, and drift into dreams where empires rise and fall like waves.